Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode. This is 1405 episode, and today we're going to discuss about media for global good. World Talent Economic Forum developed as a global media, and we have our world famous speaker for discussing today's sessions, Professor Rob. He's the president of Tando. Now World Talent Economic Forum institutions and Tando, we are initiating climate leadership program around Asia Pacific. So hopefully today we will discuss on this matter, and definitely this is helpful for global goods. This is helpful for our communities around Bangladesh, around India, or in China. Beside that, we have our another speaker, Mr. Rob Enderley. He has a very good understanding about global media and all of the things. I think also Mr. David Smith also joined to the sessions. First, I would like to request Professor Fred Philip how you want to define media for global goods, and if you share some of your views about climate leadership program.
Thank you, Sharif. Media is a very broad term, and hi, Sheridan. I can name about 5 different kinds of media. Let me name each of them and then make a few remarks about each. And incidentally, media, the word is plural, and I see even prestigious news uh, channels saying the media is. And it always grates on me because I should say the media are. But in any case, we have communication media, we have satellite phones, we have, of course, cellular phones, even the internet. And I'm talking about the mechanisms of transmitting messages, and they are media. We have social media, of course, everyone knows what those are these days. There are the news media. There are educational media, like learning management systems. And then, of course, we have the entertainment media. So, just briefly on each and where I think each of these is leading us. Um, I was terrifically happy at first to learn of satellite phones because before them it had been so easy to hide um, tyrannical regimes and atrocities committed by them and so forth. And with the satellite phones and news coverage, it was no longer necessary to smuggle rolls of film out of a country where confiscation of those films could be so easy. If you were, for example, in Idi Amin's Uganda and wanted to get news out to the parent station about what was going on there, you could no longer be stopped. And this is a terrific thing for human rights and for peace. And yet, on the other hand, as we know, every technology has a good side and a bad side, or as someone very colorfully said, if you invent airplanes, you also invent plane crashes. So, what happened with this satellite communication? Uh, More and more disasters and crimes and atrocities were reported uh, because of this capability. And as a result, we have a society that is much more fearful than it was before, simply because so many bad things are now reported that were never able to be reported before. On the social media side, I enjoy using them very much because they allow me to stay in touch with colleagues and friends all over the world. Um, but as I've circulated recently to the Tondo Fellows, the damage that social media does to young people, to preteens and teens, is no longer deniable. And now it's going to be amplified with artificial intelligence because there have been reports, many reports, that even adults have been lured into conspiratorial rabbit holes and and psychosis-inducing repeated message from AIs. So, and we don't know what to do worse with AI. Okay, then we have the news media, and everybody complains, of course, about the corporate consolidation of the news media, the loss of local reporting, political influence on the news items that are reported, and of course, the increased coverage of natural disasters that have around the world that were never reported before, and again, making people more fearful in our everyday lives. All right, then we have the educational media, the learning management systems, the shift in our own students' learning styles from reading print to preferring to watch videos. Now, all this just increases the professor's workload uh, and diverts the professor's attention away from actual lecturing and research, because we have to learn to program the learning management systems. We have to learn to produce videos instead of assigning readings. Uh, okay, even considering that I'm an old guy, just let me say that I don't like it very much. Finally, we have entertainment media. The good side is countries can really make a name for themselves and engender uh, positive feelings for their countries by through their cultural exports in movies, in radio and television, um, video shorts, all about Hollywood, Bollywood, and Nollywood. Uh, been terrific for the worldwide image of the United States, of India, of Nigeria. Think about France and Italy in films. Uh, just a terrific source of export revenue and of their image. So, in summary, I named 5 kinds of media. There's some good and bad to all of them. Uh, some very dangerous things we need to look out for. And all of them are possible conduits for the spread of misinformation. And Sharif, as you kindly mentioned, our climate initiative, much in misinformation has to do with climate. Corporate greenwashing, even the denial of climate change as a real phenomenon. And just need to be alert to that, and learning that alertness is one of the components in UNDO Climate Leadership Certificate Program. Thank you. That's all for now.
Thank you. Sharidan, for joining today's sessions. I know you have your own innovation for VR and AR. So I know, especially in Bangladesh, uh, many many extreme media, they always complain we are dying because of social media. So how they can integrate with VR and AR, or how they can develop uh, their strategy, especially with the new technology. What's your thought?
Okay. Let's see. Since 2016, I've been a co-founder of virtual reality startup companies. So in 2016, we founded OneReality.com in Sweden. I worked in Sweden for 2 years in 2008 and 9. And what we used the Unreal Gaming Engine 4.0, and we were developing sustainable cities. We did Copenhagen Malmoport, Lund 2070 plan. We did Stockholm, a new town of 50,000 people, and we did Malmo, the waterfront. So many people look to entertainment first, but the real early use cases have been enterprise because they have the money, the platforms, and the time. And so today we call them digital twins, and everybody who's in the know in architecture, engineering, construction, the AEC, which is the biggest sector in the world. It's 10% of the global economy, about $11 trillion a year, which dwarfs gaming, which is $200 billion a year. It's actually gaming's a rounding error. when you compare it to the AEC industry. So what we use, and I'm an urban planner by training. So in urban planning, we start with reality, whether it's the Copenhagen Port or wherever. And then we use the virtuality to, we scan in the existing world, and then we have open places or things we want to knock down. And then we build models of the future. So we work with architects and designers, and they have their CAD models. They could just drop them into the Unreal gaming engine. We can also simulate everything visually, like storms, hurricanes, whatever. So it's very pragmatic. And so then what we do is we use virtuality to show the future, and then we use augmented reality during construction to compare the augmented reality every day with the actual. So for example, when you're building a high-rise, you could see if you're off even at a centimeter or less, because you could just overlay it exactly over your VR model. So that's what we do for construction and engineering. And it's very useful because in the past, when you did things, you had pieces of paper. And I remember I used to work at architecture firms, and there's like piles and piles of paper. And you had to carry them around and take them to the construction site. It's really wasteful. Now we just do it online. You got your own, either cell phone, tablet, or you can use your headset, whatever you want. And you could carry whole buildings. Now, one of the big advantages of the virtuality is that we did remote management. So we would have teams around the world. We'd have architects in one city, Beijing, another in Stockholm, another in New York City, and we could be in the same room at the same time looking at the buildings. And then we could do 360s, we could do simulations, and we could do everything remotely, which you couldn't do in the past. You had to fly over halfway around the world to see it. So it's just better, faster, and cheaper. And we have a saying in urban planning, it's life or death type of things. When you build a bridge, it can't, by liability, you cannot allow it to collapse. So what we do is we what do you call it? We build once, test, and always testing. So with simulations, we could test the architectural and engineering models a million times if we want to nowadays with AI. So we could see the weaknesses, because the goal is to have zero defects, zero failure. And that's what we're working against. And this is real. Now, the good part about this is that there's a lot of jobs. I mean, with $11 trillion industry, we have to build $11 trillion worth of stuff a year. So there's a huge demand for students who are savvy in AI, VR, and Unreal, because we use Unreal, because it's very accurate in augmented reality. So on the job, we use it all the time. And so these jobs, especially the VR people, they make $250,000 because they're so valuable. And so that's where the jobs are, not in government, because the government has no money. They're usually bankrupt. So what I would do is train all young people in using VR and gaming simulation so they can qualify. And then you have to learn a technical skill. So it's not just VR. So you have to have expertise in the domain, whether it's housing, planning, water development, whatever, and then VR. And so oftentimes we have teams working with VR developers who are just VR experts, coders, and with the domain experts. And with that, you can create whatever you want. But you need to listen to the domain experts. People think that you can just use AI. Wrong. We call that garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have experts there to guide you and teachers, you go down the wrong path, and you can literally create a building that collapses, which is we call it end game for your career as well as the company. So the number one rule in VR is that it's not an AI, it's not a magic tool. It only accelerates and accentuates what you know already. So that's why you have to have experts. And if you don't have experts, then it's just a game. It's Fantasyland, and you can do whatever you want. But remember, you do not build. So what we do is we build once, measure a million times now with AI. And so the value of AI is you could do it really fast, with quantum much faster. So I think that's the future. So again, it's $11 trillion a year of construction. They hire lots of people, thousands of people, and they pay a lot of money for for enterprise. So that's the future for Bangladesh. You could be anywhere, so you don't have to be in California. You can be in Bangladesh and be working with teams around the world in real time with VR. So that's really the future, and it's already here for enterprise. The problem is the schools don't understand it yet, because they're thinking gaming, shoot them up. But all architecture departments now, everybody's learning Unreal. Okay, and it's in construction, architecture, engineering schools. It's not gotten into the public schools yet because teachers don't understand AEC. They don't realize because they have no professional experience in the field. So that's why we have to get experts in the fields, medical, or AEC, to guide the curriculum development. Because again, you can't have VR and AR and AI with people who have no expertise. That's what we call a disaster. So that's why, if anything, professors, teachers, mentors, professionals will be more valuable, not less. More valuable, because all AI does is accelerate, or what we say, garbage in, garbage out. So number one rule, because the tools are already good, don't worry about them. It's the expertise. That gets back to education and training. And that's why Fred and Rob, they're so valuable, because they have expertise in fields. And without that, we just call it dumb technology. I hate to say it, but we, in architecture engineering, the last thing you want is a kid who thinks he knows it all and knows nothing and uses these tools and they think it's real, but it's this fantasy land. And one thing we always say is, do not build it for real. Do not, because do no harm. So that's really where we're coming from. And so I think there's a huge opportunity, but we have to start with education first, not the tools. Otherwise, it's just fantasy land. And I don't want that. Like, you can do it for entertainment, it's great. But the difference between Star Wars is when the thing blows up. That's just a fantasy. In the real world, it's a game-ending move for a lot of people's lives and careers and companies. So that's why, if you want to build a stable society, it's strong and safe, you better have really good instructors, teachers, trainers, and make sure they do not make any mistakes. We're talking 0 defects now, not 90%. We're talking 0 defects. So that's the standard we work with in architecture and engineering construction. 0 defects.
Excellent. Mr. Rob, Professor Fred already mentioned about misinformation and disinformation. So you are a great strategist. And what responsibilities do media organizations have in combating misinformation and disinformation, especially during global crisis?
Well, not much, it would appear. So the issue with regard to Media for Global Good is the funding of media is the problem. What you are asking an organization to do is weigh the financial benefits against the social benefits of what it is they're providing, and at least my observation is the social benefits are not doing well. So if you look at the creation process for media, and here I'm mostly talking about public media, magazines, newspapers, television, and particularly streaming, and it really comes down to, where's the funding coming from? Where's the impetus? Even if the impetus is government funding, you have to typically be very supportive of the government that's funding you, otherwise, regardless of what it is they're doing. Otherwise, that funding is going to get cut off, and so that falls underneath the goals and guidelines you have for accuracy. Here in the United States, CNN currently is probably the most visible company struggling with this, as they try to moderate their commentary on the existing administration, so that administration doesn't put them out of business. So media has to be separate from government, otherwise it has a tendency to become propaganda. And media has to have a separation between, if it's going to be advertising funded, it has to have a hard wall, which used to be the case. It used to be the case by law here in the United States, that the funding sources and the folks that were generating news content were kept very separate. But over time, that became difficult to maintain, because if you were saying things that were positive about a large funding entity, a large advertiser, they're much more likely to advertise with you. I mean, who really wants to have an ad for their company on a page that's being critical of the company that's being promoted? And so you can certainly understand the conflicts, and the conflicts are really what damage the quality, I should say, the accuracy of media for global good. Now, the hope is that AI might be able to help solve this by being able to curate the media that you have access to and provide you with the information that you need, not the information people want to provide to you. Recognize as media becomes kind of more of a marketing arm, what it's trying to do is convince you to do things that may not be in your best interest. And so you need some type of a filter that tells you that what you're seeing isn't accurate, or what's being proposed, both either strategically or tactically, isn't in your best interest. In fact, you can often see when somebody's promoting a particular technology or idea or concept, often the focus is on short-term tactical benefits and not on long-term strategic impacts. And the end result is we tend to bounce around relatively rapidly between concepts and ideas. Global warming was brought up earlier. This is something I think I think it was 98% of the science community says we have to address this now. We're actually late, and that we may need to move much more aggressively to mitigation, because our ability to address the problem, that time is mostly past. And yet, if you look at media coverage, a lot of it being funded by the petrochemical industry. Global warming is a hoax. It's not really happening. It may be cold in the winter, but it's going to be warm in the summer, and that's just the way the world goes. I saw one recent report that said, hey, what's happening is the Earth is getting closer to the sun, and that's what's causing global warming. Even if that was true, which, by the way, it is not, you'd still want to do something to mitigate the problem. It's not a situation where, okay, the world's getting hotter. Whoopsies. It's at a certain temperature point, it becomes unsustainable to life, and that doesn't do us any good. And so what you want is a system that provides people with the information they need when they need it, and provides them with a framework within which they can make personal decisions. And that's not the way media generally works. And we can work, I think Fred was talking about different media types from education all the way across, but each one has a certain amount of bias and contamination depending on who's behind it and how it's generated. For instance, here in the States, we've started getting rid of entire classes of books and literature in schools because it goes against the messaging that the current party in power wants to have in place. And so people are getting information that implies things that are beneficial to them when the opposite is the actual fact. And so if you want to create media for good, you have to separate the funding source from the content, and you have to curate the content to the benefit of the reader, viewer, or whatever, depending on the media, and that has to be the priority. And the quality check should be both short and long term. Has the media source been consistently accurate, consistently inaccurate, and what kinds of things individually? Because reporters, even ethical reporters, can make mistakes. What kinds of checks and balances do you have in place to catch the mistakes before they get broadly circulated and people get hurt? One of the other areas we're kind of suffering through here in the States is vaccines, where even though vaccines have proven over more than a century to be incredibly viable and have massive benefits in terms of preserving health, we've become almost an antivirus, I shouldn't say antivirus, but an anti-virus country. So we've got, first time I think in my lifetime, we've got a measles outbreak that's taking over a good chunk of the country right now, because people don't want to get an antivirus, a vaccine, and the end result is we've got a medical catastrophe that was avoidable, and children are dying. And the guy that's running our health services just popped up and said, well, you really shouldn't look to me for medical advice. Well, then what the hell are you doing running a largest medical organization in the country? So that's problematic. And so the end result is, if you can't assure media accuracy, then you're going to do long-term harm to your country and organization, because they're not going to be focused on the right things. They're going to be focused on the things that whoever's funding the media wants them focused on. And that's generally not going to be in the best interest of the people, the vast majority of people that are consuming that media. Another issue we've got with regard to media accuracy is the fact people like to read stuff that supports their current worldview. They don't really like to read stuff that counters that worldview, which is problematic to media sources, because they can report something very accurately, but if the vast majority of their audience doesn't want to believe it, they're going to lose customers. They're going to lose viewers. They're going to lose readers. And that's also problematic. People need to be trained to have a certain amount of skepticism in what it is they read and to be willing to accept alternative views. If that's not the case, then it doesn't really matter what you do with regard to making media accurate. People aren't going to consume it, and even if you've got government funding or grants or whatever providing funding for the media sources and assuring its accuracy, if people don't won't read it because it's contrary to their views, then again you have a major problem. Now, how AI could help, though I have severe doubts whether it will in this particular case, because AI is showing significant problems with regard to bias and hallucination still. Some of the stuff that's coming out, we've got still have attorneys that are turning in briefs that have been generated by AI that are not only getting thrown out of court, it's getting them disbarred because the amount of hallucination is so bad, basically citing cases that don't exist. And so assuring AI accuracy really does need to be a much larger focus than it currently gets. One of the things that made DeepSeek interesting is it was the first AI company that really focused, with the obvious exception of reporting on government, on AI accuracy. And so DeepSeek hit with a much higher accuracy level than ChatGPT could provide as a result. And where I take us to AI is it's certainly possible to train an AI to curate your media for you, flag things that you're reading that are inaccurate, and point you to things that you need to read in order to protect yourself both on the short and long term. That's very possible. But unless you can ensure the AI's accuracy and quality, that doesn't do you any good. It's just bias on top of bias. And it still comes back to training kids in school to accept alternative views. If at the end of the day, the people are unwilling to accept views that are contrary to their own, media is not going to help. And so people need to be trained to be skeptical of what it is they read, to be willing to accept at least consider alternative views. I'm not talking about crazy stuff. If somebody comes up and tells you the world's flat, yeah, you don't have to sit there and spend a lot of time arguing with them. But on the other hand, if you are having a conversation about global warming and it's the Earth is getting closer to the sun versus not, then maybe that's something you can explore. At least look it up, because certainly it's possible you could avoid it. For a long time or history, people actually thought the world was flat. Anybody that said the world was round or anything else, they were often they were killed. Certainly they were discredited, and that's kind of almost that's the sad history of science in many cases. It's a lot of the early visionaries that talked about the way the world was, medical doctors, people that talked about germs. So we have people today that don't believe in germs because they can't see them with their naked eye. And back a few hundred years ago, if you started talking about this stuff, you would be tried and often terminated for those views. And so it's really important that we train kids to have open minds, to critically look at the news items and information they receive, challenge them whenever possible, so that they understand the foundations under that information, and then they can better make decisions on their life and for the people that they work for in the future. But the core to media for global good is really, one, training people to accept alternative views, and number two, to aggressively look at bias and misinformation and aggressively eliminate it, particularly when it's intentional. And without those two things in place, you really can't have media for global good. You can fix media, but if the people aren't fixed, it's not going to work. And you can fix people, but if you don't fix the media, it's not going to work. They're the two things that have to be in place for media for global good to work. That's it. That's my opening.
Thank you. I think today's session is very good example for Tando Fellows. We have another great fellow from Tando, Mr. David Smith. Mr. David, uh, my next question for you: how can local and indigenous media platform be supported to contribute to the global media landscape?
Dr. Tree, thank you so much for there, and sorry for the delays earlier. It's amazing what happens when the browser won't find any of your devices. So as we begin to look at how the media and things can begin to support it, there's many different places, because to really look at a global media landscape, not just a local media landscape, but a global media landscape, it requires strategic investment. It requires capacity building and collaboration. You know, we talk about collaboration all the time, but in this instance, you have to collaborate to amplify the local media's unique perspectives, but while also respecting, as Rob kind of said, that they're autonomous and that this is theirs. So you have to look at how local media is very important for representing voices that would be marginalized, for preserving cultural knowledge, and addressing issues that are really some of the care abouts you have of that local community. And that's, there was for a while, what, 5, 6, 7 years ago, we went through a term of what we call citizen journalism. And I think that the way we look at the local media and thing, it can be akin to that, but with more structure built around it. So how can you support it? You can support it through grants, fellowships. You know, we've talked in other issues of your program about microfinancing, and microfinancing is still a great way to support these type of organizations. Even I've seen more and more of local media using crowdfunding platforms to contribute, to empower the community to support their needs. There has to be capacity building and training. I'm fortunate because my undergraduate degree is within communication school, but you begin to look at how can you build the capacity with digital journalism, multimedia storytelling, technical skills, and how can you use workshops to teach these skills while prioritizing the cultural sensitivity you have there. So training also in media literature, and as Rob was talking quite a bit about, in fact checking, and how can you use this to combat misinformation locally, and also contribute credibility to content globally. You know, you need to have access to the technology infrastructure. And how do you overcome the digital divides? How do you build community-wide, country-wide, tap into the global infrastructure? You know, a great way to do this is partnerships. And we see that going through many places where you can republish others, you can co-produce, you can produce your own. And how do you support content in the native languages? And that's a place this can really play. So just the last couple of things, and you need to advocate for this media for policy support and work it through. You see projects like that all the way around. So, you know, the practical steps is to help fund incubators targeted to this type of media. You know, like in the United States, we have a Native American Journalists Association that's targeted to keeping that type of alive. How create digital hubs where they can produce, where other people in the community can produce. Monitor the impact. And really, it's a great way to begin to look at things. You know, we see things like in Kenya, they have a project called Ghetto Radio, which is really aimed sharing stories across the lower parts of the community there. And things like the X platform in the last elections and things have really become a strong way to get multiple voices out at the same time. So I think those are some of the things, Dr. Sharif.
Thank you, Professor Fred. We inspired by the Gallipoli strategy of Sheridan Tatsuno, and in Himalayas, in India it has Ganga, in Bangladesh we have Padma. So it's cover around 100 million people in this region, and then it's go to Bay of Bengal. And we are inspired by this Gallipoli strategy, and we are bringing 100 million peoples, and we are developing this urban planning and what you call this Gallipoli strategy in Bangladesh, in India. And next month, we have a big conference. Thousand and people will join in this conference for this introduction of this climate leaderships and Gallipoli strategy. So, from this perspective, because all of the defense peoples, government agencies, diplomats, politicians, local NGOs, corporation, they actually join in this ecosystem, and media actually playing a major role in what Rob mentions about climate related things. But climate is real. If we see these Himalayas, this Ganga, this Padma, and Bay of Bengal area, so we need to improve our life through this strategy. So, in what ways can media contribute to climate action and sustainability effort worldwide?
That's for me, Sharif.
This is for Fred, and then I will ask for Sharidan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Rob mentioned the necessity to engender critical thinking skills amongst the population, and in fact, Sharif, you mentioned Tando's climate leadership certificate, and the very first module in that certificate is system thinking and critical thinking, because it is certainly a basis for everything. In a separate project, because vaccine resistance was, anti-vaccine sentiment was also mentioned, not vaccine resistance, which is a separate thing. Tando is working with a university called Colegio de la Frontera Norte, which has several campuses along the northern border of Mexico with the United States, to produce series of videos presenting vaccine science in a very simple way to try to combat the incidence of anti-vax sentiment, and to make sure that more children are vaccinated. We unfortunately missed the funding window for this, but we will resume this initiative in 2026. Oh, what else can be done? I hesitate to suggest more regulation, but we might regulate the word news. Just to motivate that idea. In the United States, unlike other countries, the word university is not regulated. You can call any organization in the United States a university. Trump University is certainly an example, and where it doesn't resemble a university in any way, but nothing prevents you from calling it a university. Now, people have pointed out that Fox News is really entertainment and not news, and I don't find it entertaining, but in any case, the regulation of the word university would be a good idea in the United States, and perhaps regulation of the word news. All this conversation today is sort of a backdrop for what's happening in the United States with the federal government's attempts to defund public radio and public media, because that's government supported. It has reported extensively on climate. Public radio has never tried to deny the reality of climate change. and it points up the changing relationships between news media and their corporate ownership. It used to be, if you were NBC, for example, the corporation management was kept at arm's length from the news programs. This is not so true anymore. Had the very bizarre occasion recently where Jeff Bezos, the originator of Amazon, also owns the Washington Post, and leaned on the Post this time for the very first time in the Post's history not to endorse a presidential candidate at the last election. Okay. Bezos was anticipating a possible Trump victory and wanted to kiss up to the possible victor. And editors on the Post side resigned in protest, but that's admirable, but it's very easy for the corporate apologists to paint the resigned editor as a whining snowflake. And the resignations don't have a huge remedial effect on the integrity of the news organ. So if there's time later in our panel, I might talk also about academic publishing that has a unsustainable business model that turns scientific research into a quest for publisher profit. But let's not go there at the present moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sheridan. My next question for you: what role does media literally play in empowering citizens to be informed, responsible global participants? And is there any relation in between your Gallipoli strategy with media?
All right, let me go back. My history. I'm an urban planner by training, but I'm a novelist. I'm back in the 70s. I wrote poetry, short stories, novels. But then I switched to business books in the 80s. But I still write. I'm actually finishing my 17th novel about San Francisco right now. So I'm a novelist and a poet, basically. That's before I became a business person and a tech guy. So back in the day, in 1975, I visited Hiroshima, and so I started writing a novel about Hiroshima. American visits Hiroshima. It's not related to the bomb survivors. And so I thought, but it was never published. A Japanese novelist wrote the same thing, and it was made by Akira Kurosawa, called Rhapsody in August, about the atomic bomb survivors. The American was Richard Gere. So at least I wrote the right story, but it wasn't published. However, my novel was picked up by this student in San Francisco State. He was a 27-year-old cartoonist. His mom said, "Go out and get a job." So he went into the documentary program at San Francisco State Media Department, and he said, "I want to do a 5-minute class video on the atomic bomb survivors because I've done all the research about the A-bomb survivors." And so I helped guide him, and I said, "Look, you can't do it in 5 minutes, do a 1-hour PBS." He said, I've never held a camera. I said, "I don't care. I'm a writer. This is the greatest story in the 20th century." So anyway, we made it 1-hour PBS. It got 80 million viewers, one of the biggest hits in history in PBS. All right. We won the PBS Documentary of the Year Award in 1980 for survivors. And so that's what happened. And so even though it's about Japanese Americans and old, mostly ladies who were exposed to the bomb, what we did is we showed the censored Army footage, the first time ever shown in the American public, and huge interest because people are afraid of dying of uranium poisoning, in the 3 Mile Island meltdown, things like that. So one thing we learned is that most people think that the American public or any public is not interested. That's not true. They are worried about their health, safety, and welfare of their families and children. And so if you write about important things that matter, you get huge audiences. And that's one thing that shocked me. And in the people in the Bay Area, teachers, everybody's piled in to donate, help raise money for our documentary. We raised $500,000 with foundations and donations, and we had celebrations because the stories were never told, and so it's the first time. So I think going back to what Fred is saying, and Rob and David actually, is that crowdfunding, both nonprofit foundations and families, but primarily citizen donations, $5, $1, $2, $3 each, can make a big difference. Because remember, the audience is thirsting for the truth, and the media is so biased today. It's just ridiculous. So if you apply the highest standards of excellence in terms of academic integrity, where you're trying to be as objective as possible, and then you do it in a very compelling format. We showed, okay, it was really scary. We showed the bombing, people dying in the streets that had never been released. It was censored by the Army and the U.S. and Pentagon. And we had the voiceovers of the survivors explaining how they're dying, voice over that, and that was devastating. So I think the media is very, very powerful. You have to be careful. The media can lie. It can be censored, and it usually is by governments and companies. But it also can reveal. But you need to be people, and I'll be frank, you need independent journalists, you need academics who don't have a vested interest in protecting secrets, corporate secrets, or government secrets. For example, Agent Orange was covered up for years until the documentary people and professors started analyzing it, and then. So I think if we do it right, the media, especially independent journalists and the academics, because they have much more historic views, you can show things, and it's really devastating when you start revealing some of the stuff that's been hidden. But you can move huge audiences. I mean, we're talking billions of people overnight. And so let me give you just real quickly. I was in Sweden for 2 years, associate dean for a business school, and I talked to the senior VP of Ericsson. And they had this mobile lifestyle thing because Sweden had the 4G back in 2008, 9, where we didn't get census for 4 years. And I said, let me ask you a question. When you have these phones and all that, what is the biggest breakthrough revolution that's going to happen with the phone? And you know what he said? Political revolution. I go, what? He says, at Ericsson, we're worried that, they might set off a revolution. I go, what do you mean? Well, think about it. Everybody's looking at the wrong side of the phone. I go, what do you mean? Because they're looking at what to sell on the screen. The power is the camera. And I said, what do you mean? Well, think about it. With the camera, you could become a journalist reporter, just like CNN. What's to prevent you? Nothing, as Rob was saying earlier. And I said, okay, so what do you think happened? He goes, I don't know. We're waiting for a revolution. 9 months later, the Arab Spring hit. And that was the revolution that they were worried about and they were thinking about. And he said, as Ericsson, what is our responsibility when we have all these cameras running around? We can't control it. We shouldn't control it. But then the people are going to take over. And so I said, wow. So that was a very interesting thing. So what will happen, okay, is as we get more media, with more cameras, especially in the global south that's been censored and people haven't had access, I'll be frank, I expect more political revolutions and social revolutions because you can't hide the cameras anymore. You can't stop every camera. And we learned that back in 2009 with the Arab Spring. So that was a shock for me, but it happened. And it happened really fast. It happened within days. And everybody, once one person does it, everybody copies. And that's what, you can't stop that. You cannot stop citizens who are angry. I can tell you that. And don't try. And any dictator who tries is going to be in trouble, I think, in the future. So that's one thing we learned back in 2009. But anyway.
Thank you. Mr. David, my last questions for you. How can AI and emerging technology be ethically used in media creation and distribute to advance global good? And what's your closing remarks?
You know, AI is, Rob has mentioned earlier, and we've talked about in prior shows, can be used so many different ways. And it can be used for good, it can be used for bad, it can be used uh, spread disinformation to others. But some of the ways that you can go and begin to use AI to transform media creation distribution is by enhancing content creation. You can let it generate data-driven content, data-driven reports, such as economic updates, letting the journalists do more focused on the human side, the investigation work. Uh, and it can help you get content faster, but with the biases in there. Some of the AI tools make it pretty easy to do multilingual content now. So you begin to see how these translators could be built into different type of media to support local languages. And you see that being done pretty widely now, and not just with subcapturing uh, of the information, but it can be subtitling, but it can be used to actually generate it audible too, and even change the visuals using AI. You can use tools like DALL-E or Runaway machine learning to create visuals and animation and make it really, really very, very engaging. So, for example, I've seen multiple places where AI generated art has been used in climate campaigns to visualize future scenarios. Uh, but AI, I personally believe that AI generated content needs to be labeled that it's AI generated because it's a real ethical consideration here. Algorithms need to be audited to prevent things, much like we saw yesterday with what happened on XAI and how that one command change made the biases jump out everywhere. AI can help personalize the access to it. It can recommend content based on user interest. It can have accessibility features to help people who have disabilities, like visually impaired people. There can be AI can help optimize content where the infrastructure is not much in place. So if there's low internet areas, it can help optimize content for those sides. Um, a big one as you look at this is it can be used to facilitate global engagement and trigger that. There's just so many other places, Dr. Sharif, where it can be gone as I look at sustainability, accessibility, education, uh, citizens' involvement, pulling together the Technopolis elements. But there's challenges we have to meet. We have to really get a handle on the transparency. We have to get a handle on the biases that are in the AI models. When you look at the digital divide, AI is going to have job displacement, and it really can reduce journalism jobs. So reskilling programs are necessary. And there's some regulatory issues that are really coming up here. Global standards for artificial intelligence use in media are inconsistent. And because reach of media, what is acceptable in one country might not be acceptable in the next country. And so these are some of the elements, I think, Dr. Sharif, as we look at this, and it's a very important topic we have to address. Today's digital media, by definition, is global. But what we see with some of the topics we've had here, and there is that we want to preserve the local elements. We want to preserve the culture. We want to preserve those elements, but we need to also realize we're producing for a global distribution. And that's where AI can help. That's where other emerging technologies can help. But there's equal challenges as well as equal opportunities. And we have to be diligent as we look at those, Dr. Sharif. So thank you for allowing me to be part of this today.
Thank you, Mr. Rob. What's your closing remarks for today's sessions, and if you want to respond to this question?
Well, I think my closing remarks are, if you really want to create media for global good, you need to first start with making sure there's adequate training for critical thinking in schools, so that if you have accurate media, people will consume it. And then second, you need to separate the funding sources from the media suppliers and provide a certain level of assurance that what they're reporting is accurate, with penalties, enforced penalties in place for intentional inaccuracy. People are going to make mistakes. I'm not suggesting people should go to jail if they just screw up. But the other hand, if somebody has been paid to carry a message and that message is inaccurate, then there should be consequences. And if they're not, if those two things aren't done, you're never going to have a situation where you're going to be able to trust the media or trust the outcome of accurate media, or really accurate media just simply won't be able to survive. Those two foundational elements have to be in place, and without them, you cannot have media for global good.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Fred, my last question: how can partnership between media, government, and civil society amplify effort toward achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goal? And what's your closing remarks?
You know, the Sustainable Development Goals are such a self-contradictory mess. I don't really want to try to answer that question. Instead, if I may, as a closing remark, I want to be upbeat and emphasize what a tremendous amount of good the media can do. The things that move people the most are expert storytelling and very striking images. And I was reminded recently that very iconic photograph of the called Palm Girl during the, am I fading out here? The Napalm Girl running down the street in Saigon, her clothing having burnt off. This was the image that changed the balance of public sentiment in the United States against the war in Vietnam. So what a tremendously positive impact that photograph had. I think, though, that we need to pay attention to the technological dynamics of what we've been talking about here. If satellite photographs of the Nazi death camps had been available, the sentiment in World War II would have been to end that war a heck of a lot faster, but we didn't photograph that. Then we had the era of the Napalm Girl, and that was before Photoshop. And now what do we have? Fake tattoos on the knuckle of that poor fellow who got sent to El Salvador. And the ridiculous debate on the news show about whether those tattoos, gang tattoos, are fake or real, then they're very obviously fake. So the next technological regime may make it very easy to distinguish AI-generated fakes, and we will see. Hopefully, we will see.
Thank you. Mr. Sheridan, what's your closing remarks for today's session?
Okay. Well, the media is incredibly powerful. You can stop dictators. You can start wars. You can end wars if you do it right. It is, especially in the hands of the citizens, all right, because there's no control over angry citizens. I can tell you that. And it moves very fast. It's viral, and it happens within minutes today. So how do we control this uncontrollable mass of people who are armed with cameras. The camera is the new weapon, right? And politically, economically, socially. So I think that teachers and professors can actually use this because we have all these free distribution channels called TikTok, Facebook, everything. So, and children have cameras and phones. So instead of just banning it, saying, let's look at the camera because we're all producers today. And we have a responsibility to the world because the power of the lens. Don't spend your time scrolling. Spend your time producing. So the question then is, how, I think that teachers, professors can say is that to integrate it into STEAM education, arts, and then the STEM. Okay, use your personal camera for good, because you are a producer just like CNN or TikTok. And what do you want to show the world? And then integrate that into the classrooms. And then I would say have these teamwork where you have challenges saying, okay, look at poverty or look at pollution, whatever, pick a topic and then show us and tell us a story and interview people because you are CNN today. Each person is CNN. And if we do that, we can harness the power, and it's already out there. We have billions of phones. We've got all these free distribution channels. So today, this access issue is almost a moot issue. It's really, what are you going to show and tell? That's what it comes down to now. And so instead of having kids doing crazy stuff like TikTok, I know a lot, okay, you have a lot of dancing and all, I get it. You want to be Hollywood stars. But really, responsible and really valuable, critical, creative thinking, you still need guidance. You need mentors and teachers, okay? Otherwise, it goes crazy. And so that's what I would recommend.
Thank you. This is excellent discussions. I request all of our audience, please share our content as much as possible with the government agency, corporation, and academia. We have thinkers, we have doers, we have world famous people in our teams, and we want to solve all of the complex problems in Global South with the help of Global North. So thank you everyone for joining today's sessions, and you know that we already collaborate with Port TV USA, and hopefully tomorrow it will be live again. Thank you, bye-bye, and take care.
Thank you, Sharif. Thanks all. Good to see you.
Thank you.